You make a bunch of noise out here, so they have peace and quiet in here. Because there's no better sound than the squeak-free guarantee from Advantech Subflooring and Advantech Subfloor Adhesive.
Pete Yost here for the UnBuild It Podcast. I'm here with my fellow podcasters, Steve Bazek.
Hello, UnBuild It Podcast.
And Jake Bruton.
I'm just going to say hello like a normal person.
Oh, I appreciate that. So you're tuned in today to hear about the challenges that are faced to build high-performance homes for insulation contractors and HVAC contractors. And I was the one who initiated this topic because I think those are the two that are particularly challenging for both, well, for all of us, for those focused on the building science of building.
You've never seen a one-arm paper hanger.
No, I have not seen a one-arm paper
Just
hanger.
saying.
How did you know that? How did you know that that was the case?
Have you seen a one-armed paper hanger?
Yep.
Yeah.
You talk about challenges.
Okay.
But anyway, sorry.
Is it okay if I just stick with insulation and
Go ahead.
HVAC?
I didn't mean to interrupt, but
Yes,
just
you
figured
did.
I'd throw it out there.
So why do you think those two particular contractors face particular challenges?
Well, I'd start with it's the same challenge that every builder and subcontractor faces when the high-performance thing comes to their market. They've never done it before. They don't know what they're supposed to be looking for, and they're not interested in changing. How am I going to bill for that?
I mean, the HVAC contractor, it's one of the few mechanical pieces in the house, right? So it's an active participant, not a passive participant. So the insulation guy, he kind of gets off because if he does a bad job, you just have a slightly inefficient insulation system. If the HVAC guy does something wrong, like crimp a pipe or something, you can effectively not have the comfort you're desired. So it's pretty easy to identify their deficiencies.
So let's
when
start
the house
with
gets commissioned.
just HVAC guys, and we'll split them up. I think that works a little nicer because they have different problems.
So the reason I picked these two contractors, but let's start with HVAC, for me is that it's the one area where we have really increased the complexity of the systems we use. And I hear comments all the time from affordable projects all the way up through high-performance projects that while the equipment's gotten a lot more sophisticated, the folks installing them have not.
Or speccing it.
And interestingly, when we were trying to do high performance under Building America back in 2000, what was the contractor that stood out as the toughest to get lined up to deal with the higher performance homes with Building America?
Yeah, it was HVAC.
It was HVAC contractors.
So we did the Hilltop house. We used Mitsubishi equipment in that house. It's all heat pump stuff, 2 mini splits and a ducted unit. And we had an HVAC designer, an engineer, design the system. And then because we knew that we were going to film it and people were going to see it, we sent the information to Mitsubishi, a contact there, and said, hey, this is what our HVAC designer is speccing.
Interesting.
What do you think? And they went, this is ridiculous. There's no way that the house needs that much cooling.
Yeah.
I know that it's got windows, but it's triple. And they redesigned it and cut the system in half.
So you had an engineer do it, a mechanical engineer?
And and somebody that we respect, somebody that's worked with our houses before, somebody that did the design for my house and this studio and all these things. And they just missed the mark and they were panicked.
It's pretty typical.
They were panicked.
I mean, that house up in Windsor, it's 1480 or something like that, just under 1,500 square feet. We were designing it. Homeowner, excuse me, sends it out to the HVAC guy. Comes back and he's got 4 mini split systems in this house, and he has a load of 60,000 BTUs or some crazy number. Yeah. And I was like, the homeowner, first of all, gets me that. And he goes, Steve, we paid all this money to design this really efficient house, and this doesn't seem like efficient. I said, no, that number should be 15.
When your
16.
homeowner says that, that's not a particularly good sign.
Well, he's well versed, and I'm like, no, that number should be down sub 15.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
They had the 2,600 square foot hilltop house at like 25 or 35,000, BTUs. And when Mitsubishi came back, they were like, we don't design equipment, but we think your load's probably somewhere around like 19,000 BTUs.
Yeah.
So what are the tools available for either the engineer or the contractor to make sure that the system, and we're talking
1 ton, 2 ton, 3 ton, 4.
Yeah. Right.
For those of you just listening, Steve did the HVAC guy standing across the street. He holds his hand at arm's length. If he can cover the house with 2 fingers, it's a 2-ton unit. If you can cover it with 3, it's a 3-ton unit.
I mean, we have the tools, and this is what I generally cite as the ACA manuals. That's the Air Conditioning Contractors of America. And there's the manual J for the total loads of the building. There's a manual S for sizing the system. There's a manual D for the duct distribution. And those are excellent standards, and you can invoke them.
But you can screw those up.
It's garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yeah,
That's true of any calculation.
Without an HVAC designer on the project, and we just let one of our previous HVAC crews do the calculations, like the first time they came back to me on the Prairie House, I was like, yeah, but can I see the manual J? Because that seems like a lot. And he was like, yeah, I'll email it to you. And I said, okay, you have double glazed windows. We're not using double glazed windows. Like, the whole thing is garbage after that. Yeah. You have the plans.
Well, the other one, too, that is hard to calculate in there, that I'm told anyway, is the effective air leakage, right? Because a lot of those programs just have it as like excellent, good, and average or something. There's no way to like dial in a 0.5 or something.
And so when the manual J does give you the option to punch in a number, that previous HVAC contractor would always put in 3.
Yeah.
And I was like, but it's not going to be 3. And he goes, well, we don't know that until it's done. I was like, okay. We built 6 houses in the last 4 years.
Better than 1.
Yeah,
we know that for sure.
6 houses in the last 5 years. One of them didn't meet passive house standards.
Right.
Like,
better not have been mine.
Can we just? It wasn't
good,
but it was the one that you and I wrote the article about.
There you go.
So at least we can agree that we do have these tools, and they should be used. And if they're used properly, you get a lot closer to the design of the system. But we have a new ACA manual called LLH, which is the low load homes. Ooh. And that is in response to that the tools that we currently have, JS and D, need to be further honed if you have a really low load home. And one of the things that's coming out as a result of that is that you increase the shoulder seasons. Now you may need whole house dehumidification because you're not relying upon either the heating or the cooling system to do incidental dehumidification. Mm-hmm. And we're sitting here on a mild day, and we have really efficient systems, and we're recording the humidity behind us at 68%. Yeah. And why is that? Because this is a low load home, and we don't have. Do you have whole house dehumidification?
There's a lot of hot air getting thrown around here.
It's not hot air; it's humid air, my friend.
Hot, moist air getting tossed around here. How's that?
What is the? It comes into play with 62.2. The amount of liquid that we exhale every hour, isn't it like a liter of water or something like that?
It's funny. I looked this up and got it from my brother Nathan, who's a pulmonary doctor, and of course he knows all about expiration rates and so on. I think it's like over an 8-hour period, an adult generates like a liter of water. And I was doing this because they asked me to come and do building science for tiny houses. And so I brought in a cup of water, a pint of water, and a quart of water. And I said, which one of those represents how much moisture will be released by a dog and an adult inside a tiny house in 8 hours? And I never got invited back to the tiny house thing again. I have no idea why, because it was fascinating.
I have some clues.
Also, that rate has to be a lot less if my wife's mad at me. Because if she doesn't talk, she's not expelling the same amount of
I've been practicing this.
Do your spouses listen to the podcast? Because
We've covered this.
I've been
This is a
practicing-
safe space.
I've been practicing
never
this
gonna hear it.
ancient Japanese breathing technique to become more efficient in my breathing and moisture.
How's that going?
It's very good. Very
Yeah.
good. It's working out really well.
I don't believe you, but if it's true, I'm really impressed.
It was clever. I'll give you
So
that.
we do know that the better the job we do with the enclosure, the more honed our mechanical systems need to be.
Yep.
And that's the loads, the sizing, and the duct distribution. And I remember one of the first really cool times I gained respect for Steve. It's happened not very often, but the first time was watching him work with Coda, sending the plans back and forth for where the ducts were going to go. And I had no idea that the size of the duct mattered, the run mattered, and you could actually calculate the supply and return needed if you knew the loads involved with the buildings.
Did you know the time of day or the day of the week mattered?
The day of the week?
I know. So here's
Because
one.
whether or not everybody's home
Here's one of my stories. I'm up in Eden Prairie, Minnesota.
Yeah.
Centex Homes with I think it was Ed Von Thoma.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
And we were talking about framing, advanced framing, and HVAC, high performance and such. And he goes, Steve, you don't understand. We got to start our installs for HVAC on Tuesdays. And I said, really? You start them on Tuesdays? He goes, yeah, and we hope that they're done by Thursday. And I said, really? He goes, well, fishing season. Friday, these guys are just racing to get out of here. And the type of work you get on Friday is absolutely horrible by the HVAC contractor. Monday, all they're doing is sitting around, showing up late, talking about all their fishing stories from the past weekend. And so you're not getting any good work there. So he goes, the only real productive days for an HVAC contractor in Eden Prairie is Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
That's fantastic.
So you have them do silly work on Mondays and Fridays, and you concentrate on the good work in the middle of the week.
Wow.
That's the same
constraint.
when every time I talk to my plumber, and I'm like, what are you doing? How's the boat? Like, I don't know any plumber that doesn't own a boat. HVAC guys are fishermen, apparently.
Yeah.
Well, they deal with liquids. They have to cover all the bases. All right. So the other thing we haven't talked about in terms of sort of more sophisticated needs from HVAC contractors are whole house mechanical ventilation systems, because in my neck of the woods, that is just as problematic as the space conditioning systems.
Yep. I think, I think part of it is it's always this game of expectations too. Like a lot of times I'll do a walkthrough, like we do walkthroughs with electricians and we talk about where the lights and switches go. A lot of times if it's a project that warrants exactness, if you will, we'll do a walkthrough with the HVAC contractor just to make sure, because they'll have a window centered in a wall, and then for some reason the register's a joist bay over from center, and it's like, oh well, that's what they showed on the plan in the basement, and it's like, well, did you ever go upstairs to see? No, we just cut the hole from down below. And it's like, yeah, exactly.
Trust but verify.
We need to do a little walkthrough to make sure, okay, this is in the right location, it's centered, and it's more aesthetic purposes. But it is also when you do the walkthrough and you say, okay, so we're going from the trunk here, we got to get over to that corner. And all of a sudden you're in the basement, there's these dropped LVLs and this way of how do you get there? Because we've all been in buildings where they've crimped the pipe or tried to force it around this corner, and it's totally useless.
And I think it was definitely on a Building America project at Building Science Corporation where there was this incredibly frustrated HVAC contractor who was trying to get ducts through.
Which is every HVAC contractor.
I was just going to say that.
And he turned to me and he said, do you know what my definition of non-structural is? And I said, no. He goes, anything in my fucking way. Do we have to bleep that? I meant to say effing way.
Peter has a nasty mouth.
That was a quote.
He has
That was
a potty
quote.
mouth.
That was a quote.
Just for the record, Peter was the first one to drop an F-bomb on Build It Podcast.
Probably our views are going to go way up.
So here's the way that we handle this side of things. When we're doing something super important, we try to check what's going on before the design. we have, and I know a lot of people will be like, oh, you're probably overpaying if you don't work with more than one HVAC guy. I trust my HVAC guy. I ask him what it's going to cost to do it right. He knows that we have one installer, shout out to Carl, for mini splits, because he's the man in our community, and he's been to the most trainings. He knows Fujitsu. He knows Mitsubishi. Like, he knows how they operate. He's done as much as anybody else. And we have one crew that does ductwork for us, and it's 2 guys. Shout out to Joseph and, dang it, James.
You know these guys well,
and
huh?
they, yes, and they, even when we used the Zender for the first time at the Hilltop house, I said, I want you guys to install this. And I know it wasn't part of your original scope of work, but I need those guys to do it because I want them to understand how to do it moving forward.
So I just had a thought. If we have such an emphasis on control layers for the enclosure, what you just described is an awful lot of control for HVAC performance.
Yeah.
So if we have control layers that we're really fussy about for high performance buildings, sounds to me like we have to have the same level of control in terms of performance of the HVAC.
Hey,
Is that and that's meant to be sort of a wrap up so we can move on to installation contractors.
Yes.
All right, I was going to give you guys a quiz, but now I'm not going to give it to you.
Oh, no,
Okay.
No.
It's fine. So you don't get the, it's a really cool quiz, too.
And the other thing is, I'm going to make you even a little angry because I have to, when I talk about insulation contractors, say that my pet peeve is you got to manage moisture and energy with equal intensity. And so the problem is, yeah, that's why. It didn't make you angry, it made you sleepy.
Made me sleepy.
Yeah.
It's an angry sleep.
Well, the
an
idea
angry-
is
angry
that
sleep.
if we have to manage both and all they do is manage heat flow, that creates problems. And most of the time when we're talking about it's kind of funny? We have weatherization contractors.
No, you know what's kind of funny? Have you ever seen the guys that come out of the back of an insulation truck?
Now that is funny.
Okay. No, and I'm not saying they're funny, but I'm saying matching up the guys that come out of the back of the insulation truck with managing heat and moisture with equal intensity.
There you go.
And trying to get them to believe and understand and be on the same page with that concept, I find amusing.
Well, I totally agree with you, and we're going to come back to that. But I just want to say, weatherization. I mean, weatherization means that you should be controlling moisture and energy, because in the word weather, right? And yet, one of the big problems has been that they come in and manage just the insulation or the heat flow, and then that creates moisture problems. I work with 2 or 3 different insulation contractors in my neck of the woods, and they're bringing their game up. They're understanding that they either have to honor the moisture management that's required, and what's happened more and more is they don't call me as often, but if they get to a situation where they're unsure, I've actually had them tell clients, you really need to have Peter come in and look at this because we won't insulate this until we're sure we have the moisture managed.
So the opportunity for success, just as with HVAC insulation, it starts with good design. It starts with an architectural design in place that's accurate and appropriate for the climate and the performance of the home. And I would tag on our scope of work. So like, even though you give us, Steve, you give us the most well-executed and well-documented plans that we work with from any architect, it also doesn't say that there's a vent chute in every bay in the attic when we're doing a vented attic. But my scope of work says that.
Right.
And the code calls for like 1 in every 3. Or it calls for balanced. So the same at the eaves as up top. And that equates to about 1 of every 3. So if that's not in there, our insulators will show up and go, well, that wasn't part of our bid. We're not putting chutes in every single one. We bid every third. And so like that's a simple, somebody has to be paying attention. Somebody has to note these things to begin with so that they know what they're gonna do when they get there.
I'm going to have to write each bay on my little note for the AccuVent.
So the special case for me for insulation contractors too is my first research project at the NHB Research Center was Isonine, which was a brand new spray insulation back in 1993.
Who's the guy that invented that? We met him. Have you ever met him?
Graham, what was his last name? But then there was
You're thinking of the telephone. Peter also remembers the telephone being
Yeah, I don't
invented.
remember it being
Shoot,
Graham.
no, the
He
head
was a Canadian
chemist.
dude. He was the Canadian dude, Joe's buddy. Out
Yeah,
of Toronto.
Graham Kirkland or something like
No,
that. But he
that's
had
not
an Eastern European guy who was his chemist that I did a lot of work with. And
I
now
just remember going to a Brazilian steakhouse in Vegas with him.
Oh,
Sorry.
I'm not surprised
took it
that
back
it
to a
tied
meal.
back to a
Yeah,
meal.
took it back to a meal. It was a good time.
But the key thing was I thought, for the first time, we have an insulation where the quality of installation doesn't matter, right? Because it goes and fills all the nook and cranny. A lot like ice cream, by the way. It just fills all the nooks and crannies.
But it doesn't. Because if you
doesn't.
cut a cross-section of Icynene, it doesn't fill all the...
Well-
it creates nooks and crannies.
So the quality has shifted from the quality of the sort of the craftsmanship of the installation to the quality of the chemical reaction management, right?
Yeah, which means the equipment and the fiddling.
Yeah, and insulation manufacturers don't make insulation; they make ingredients. If it's spray foam, the chemical companies are selling the ingredients. The manufacturing of the product happens at the job site.
With the hot and sweaty guy that's wearing the mask and the monkey suit and everything.
So when we talk about control, I tell my insulation contractors two things. One is you have to be certified at the company level, third party, and at the installation level by either ABA, the ABAA, the Air Barrier Association
I
of
thought they were
America.
banned in the 70s.
That was my mistake to say
Did they come out with a movie,
ABAA.
Mamma Mia or something?
ABAA,
Yeah.
Air Barrier Association of America, or the SPFA, the Spray Polyurethane Foam Alliance. They both have third
Those
party.
are a riveting bunch, by the way.
They are. I partied with them before.
I'm looking at the camera now. They both have third-party certification programs, and in Canada, it's required that you be certified. In the United States, it's recommended. And then the second thing is, I can't understand why we're not doing blower door performance test requirements. Open cavity or before you close up
prior
those
to wallboard.
prior to wallboard to make sure you got it right.
Me too.
Cool. But I'm not surprised that you guys are on the top of your game when it comes to this topic.
So after design, it comes down to execution again, same as with HVAC, and it comes down to supervision.
And performance-based verification.
I don't
Do you
like
remember the
supervision.
Trust But Verify? Do you remember the Owens Corning Complete? We're going to caulk every joint on the inside of the house that they came out with.
Yeah. Well, so there was an EcoSeal system by
Yep.
Knauf, I think. And then was it Certainty that had that?
No, I think
it was
Owens Corning Complete is what they called it.
Complete system, yeah.
And so we had a couple years of trying to get to the site at the exact moment that they were thinking that they were going to start doing that.
Oh, interesting.
And even one time, Pat, our favorite installer now, he was working on it, and I was like, okay, Pat, so number one, if this is going to work, we have to do it everywhere. He was like, well, I have done it everywhere. I was like, okay, well, what about this joint in this header? What about this joint in this header?
Yeah.
What about where the header connects to the jack? And so it was like let's talk about why this system is flawed from an install. And then I said, okay, and we don't want this because you're trying to create an air barrier, and the green wall board that's on the outside of the wall is our air barrier. So all I want you to do is the inside. I just want you to insulate, not do this
let's not
caulking
take
product.
500 feet of joints. Let's caulk 3,000 feet of joints.
Yes. And I was like, this is I need you to only focus on insulation. You're not air sealing anything on this house. And that took 3 houses of showing up at the right moment and going, please don't get that out of the truck. Please put that back in the truck. We're not
Such
doing
a bully.
that.
But so it's interesting because we're talking about control layers at the design level and then translation to job site details and then verification with something that, I remember the first time I did a blower door test on insulation I had installed. I was so freaking angry because I was the one that done it. And
We
I
are an
didn't.
angry person. Doesn't take much.
And I'm getting angry
Curmudgeon is
by
the
the
word
minute
that comes to
because
mind.
of, comments like, I know you're my podcast buddy, but
I'm just. I call
But
it
it's
how I
good.
see
I
it.
think to get angry
If you
about
don't want to be called
insulation
angry,
is a
don't be
good
angry.
thing. because what does insulation do? It makes things more heated. And so should our conversations be insulated?
He got there quicker than I would have
I
thought.
did get a peach joke in. Unbelievable, even as bad as it is.
But so I did choose to single these two contractors out. Do you think there is another key contractor that is?
For us, it's our framers because they're in
interesting.
charge of so much of the air sealing detailing and window installation. There's a lot of hand holding there. There's a lot of like, hey, let's step back. Let's look at this. Let's make sure that we're continually saying the word continuous in our head when we talk about our air barrier, things like that.
And is that because you use a system generally that's an exterior air seal?
Yeah.
As part of the sheet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The zip system.
Yeah.
Which I had a moment of pride the other day. I had our HERS rater, after they tested my personal house that we were really happy with the score, said, oh, we finally tested another one that was like below 1.5 ACH 50. And I was like, oh yeah, who? And he told me the builder. And he said, yeah, they did a really good job. And I was like, yep. His framer is my framer. And he took our details there, and without my supervision, it was 3 times as leaky as the houses that we're building.
So I just, as sort of a wrap up, want to give a shout out to Henri Fennell. He's the guy, another Vermonter.
I know who Aaron is.
Super
I
spy?
had coffee with
Is
him
he a-
like 3 or 4 years
sounds like
ago.
a
Super spy.
Yeah, he sounds like a
He's
super.
the godfather
Henri.
of spray foam insulation.
Yeah, he's actually a trained architect, but had an insulation company focusing on spray foam for a long time. He kept getting underbid by all the folks who weren't doing the right insulation details. So he and I wrote an article together called 7 Tips to Getting Foamed in Place Insulation Correct. And it was his 7 points that he uses that all spray foam jobs should comply to. And that article is a free download off of buildinggreen.com.
Do we have time for a story?
We
Yes.
have time for a short story to wrap
Okay,
up.
so I'll leave you with this.
Is
It ties directly into what you're just saying. Good insulators.
Is it also
bad
an
insulators.
anecdote?
No, it's an anecdotal story. So, working on this project, I tell the homeowner, I said, this is the insulator that I usually use. We get a price, it's like $38,000 to insulate the house. The homeowner on his own gets another insulator, comes back and price is $21K. And says, Steve, I have a really hard time paying $17,000 more just to use your guy. And I said, I don't have any allegiance to them. I mean, I like them. They do a good job. As long as this guy is going to do the same job. Before we award it, let me just go back. Let's go back to my insulator. And he comes back and says, Steve, I probably can't buy the material for that price. And I said, all right. He goes, it's all right. So we go with the $21K guy. So he installs it. Homeowner says, maybe you want to come by and just check it out. So I do. And in the basement, which was probably close to 3,000 feet, we had 2 inches of closed cell on the wall. So I got out a coat hanger, 4 inches long, stuck it in, pulled it out, measured it. 1.125 inches, 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches. 1.5 inches was probably the highest. It averaged around.
So they paid for 2.
We paid for 2.
And
so we
got-
called the guy and said, I had a green can with me, so I painted green wherever I measured it and said, and you could stand in there and it's just green stripes everywhere. It's like a zebra, green zebra. And the guy in charge of the installation company came and said, I said, everywhere there's a green stripe, we're less than 2 inches. It's pretty much everything. All right, we'll have the guys come. I ran my hand across the top. They sprayed the wall. They sprayed from down below the band joist, but the band joist never connected to the
They
wall.
never went like that.
They never.
Pointing
That whole
down.
top of the foundation wall to mud sill, wide open. Go upstairs.
Key to the air seal, yeah.
We go upstairs and basically 2x10s. We're supposed to get 9 inches of spray foam. Almost every rafter, I can see the side of it, and so I tell the insulation guy, I said, hey, if we call for it to be full, I shouldn't be able to see the side of the rafter. And I said, it's not rocket science to see that one, right? I can see the foundation wall, even though you guys should be checking it. But this is a visual inspection,
Right.
It's flush to the thing. Nope. So they came back 5 times. Like the 5th time, the guy's dropping F-bombs at me. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. This is your scope of work. You wrote it.
Yeah.
You said
And
you
there's
were
the
going to deliver
17K
this.
difference.
I'm losing money and this and that.
That's not my fault.
It's not my fault. This
Right.
is the scope of work that you provided and said you were going to put in. Not me. You wrote that. And it's one of those things where spray foam, it's real easy. And that's how these guys are able to get these jobs, because nobody checks them.
Yeah.
And they just go in, and they probably did make money
The
on
first
day
time.
one if they were able to just drive away and not have to return.
So the wrap up here is that we need control freaks for both insulation, trade contractors, and HVAC. So,
Which is going to tie in nicely to the next podcast. So make sure you tune into the next podcast.
Do we have another one?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Cool.
I'm not giving away what it is, but listen to the next one.
So
Wait,
that's a
were
wrap.
you guys planning on quitting? Is this the last one and I didn't know it?
No, I was just wondering if
We-
we
we-
I feel
trying to
like
break
I
it to
should
you
know
gently.
if you're quitting.
for those of you that are watching our podcast right now, we're planning to do another 4,648, I believe. Right now we're contracted
we
for.
agreed
So
And I'm the guy with the white beard who says there's not going to be 4,600 more.
48. 4,648.
So that's a wrap from the UnBuild It podcast. Make sure that you click on those silly little buttons you're supposed to subscribe and like and all the other crap that you have to do related to social media. And
Tell a friend, too.
Just tell a friend. That's the main
Tell
thing.
2 friends.
And ask them to tell 2 friends.
Because several of us have more than 2 friends.
Some of us.
Thanks for tuning
I have
in.
no friends, so if you need a friend,
That ended way sadder than it should have. Have a good day.